So, sorry. Welcome, everybody. Just wanted to, I guess, introduce the session. I don't want to take up much time because I've been through what we're looking at today, and Susie's put together some really great slides and information. We're going to focus on throughout the onus on you as a teacher, and I guess a criticism of online or fear with online learning is, well, does the teacher become insignificant? And actually we're finding that the teacher is even more significant in online learning. And so that's what we're hoping today, to be able to introduce a bit of that concept to you so you can see where that fits. And also following on with that theme of trying to find something that you can introduce now, something you can do next week, something that you can do in the future, and then leading on to what we've got planned in the next couple of weeks, which is pretty exciting as well. So I'll man the chat room again, so if you've got questions or if you want to make comments or something, or if you need us to interrupt Susie, I'll just send a question through, and I'll just sort of reply where I can, or let Susie know when you've got a question. And so I will say over to you now, Susie.
Thank you, Teresa. And welcome everyone to the session. We're now up to 30. Thank you for joining us on your lunch break, and I know you have a busy day. So we've got a bit to cover, but I do want to leave some time at the end, like I did last time, for you to have a chat in some breakout rooms amongst yourself. Now, the topic today is about how to foster the human connection when you shift into the online environment, from that classroom to the keyboard, as it were. In this session, we're going to talk a lot about a concept called teacher presence. And we're going to start that by framing it around, and someone, if you just make sure everyone puts their, Colleen, could you put your computer on mute, please? Thank you. So the importance of teacher in the shift from teacher-centered classroom to student-centered learning environments. So we'll start with that as a bit of a frame, and then we'll go in to talk about what is teacher presence, i.e. that human connection in the online learning environment. How can you make that be something that's within your control? And I'll give you some, as Teresa said, some practical ideas that you can implement now, or in the next term or beyond. Because we've got now 32 people peppered throughout this session and series are a whole range of ideas to appeal to people at different levels. So some of you might be just starting out, some of you may have been doing fully online for some time, others of you may be doing blended and not sure kind of where to go, or you've got a roadmap for where to go. So there's a real, recognizing that there's a real difference. So we'll be peppering lots of ideas through this. So I encourage you to take notes. The PowerPoint slides will be made available, as we did last time, on the Totara site, and when the recording comes through, that will be there as well. And for those of you who did download the PowerPoints last time, you'll see that I've included a whole lot of information with each slide. It's well worth a read, and there are connections and links to other resources there if you want to dig deeper. As we talked about last time, and as Teresa just mentioned, this series is all about giving you ideas to work smarter. So do what matters the most. Well, looks like that slide didn't come up very well. And work hard. In other words, it's about thinking about your teaching approach first, the pedagogy or the andragogy, and the technology second. So there's the time and place for the technology, but this series is more about our teaching approach than it is about a how-to for technology, as you'll see. First thing I really want to just talk about front and centre is that there's been this real shift as teachers from a perspective that talks about how we teach. Back, I suppose, when I sort of first started in teaching, and I'm sure it's the same with many of you, the focus was on what do we need to teach, how do we teach, but now it's all about how students to learn. And that shift has, in the literature is called student-centered classroom, the student-centered model, through to the learner-centered or the student-centered classroom. So I've just got this bit of a image here, because one of the things I find with people, and I've experienced it myself, is that in the teacher-centered classroom, because it's all very physical, we can see the boundary of it. It's bounded by 4 walls generally. In the online environment, it's much harder to get a sense of where your class begins and ends, and a lot more in this learner-centered classroom goes on, whether you're in a face-to-face environment or not. You, as the educator, are no longer just the instructor. You're now the facilitator of learning. You're very much about fostering environments where students collaborate with each other, and the learning comes from peers, not just from you as the expert. The students are also constructing their own knowledge. They're they're participating in active learning and collaborative learning, and student engagement, of course, is the language that we're hearing a lot of, not just in CQU but across the sector, whether it's higher ed or vocational education and training. But in this student-centered classroom, I really want to, spend some time on this, just to, as Teresa said, indicate that you still have a critical role, because regardless of whether you're in a face-to-face environment, a fully online environment, or a blend somewhere in the middle, as we talked about the last session, quality learning outcomes and good teaching is very, very dependent on you. And this is a quote that comes from a report that was put out a couple of years ago by a woman, by Kathy Stone from University of Newcastle. And it was all about, she put together some guidelines for online learning, improving student outcomes in online learning, some national guidelines for Australian universities. And this is what she had to say about teacher presence, that we're absolutely crucial, that you are absolutely crucial in building teacher-student and student-student relationships. A strong teacher presence provides online students with a sense of belonging, helping them to connect, to feel connected in a community of learning, and increasing their likelihood of persisting. And I think that's probably something that you are well aware of when it comes to the face-to-face classroom, but sometimes I think that gets lost in the online environment, mainly because we don't know how to do it. Would that be something that people have an understanding of, or kind of feel the same? Anything you want to add in the chat? Okay, doesn't seem to be anything there. So I want to show you a little video which talks about what teacher presence is. I'm going to play both this whole video in the session, but I want to start by just hearing from their higher education academics, as you'll see. But once you get into listening to them, you'll realise that what they're saying also applies to you. Now I just have to stop the sharing. Start it again.
This is the technical side of the teaching, the online environment, I guess. And
Education is very lonely. A student, it's just to receive a whole load of course materials and start wading their way through it. It's not very engaging.
The role of an academic now is really designing learning environments that engage students. If I'm saying that engagement is the holy grail, I better be engaging in ways that they enjoy, not that I'm used to.
I think the notion of teacher presence in an online environment is absolutely critical. I can't underscore that enough.
If you want to be successful at it, you need as a teacher to have students sensing your presence there.
It was important for me to indicate to students in a variety of different ways that I was engaged and interested in what they were doing.
You have to be there, you have to be paying attention to what they are saying. And what I find is if you do that effectively in the first 2 weeks, the rest takes care of itself. You've established the benchmark that you're expecting.
Teacher presence is a very important part of the socialization of students into online learning. And it's not that you are therefore dominating and telling the students what to learn. It's that you're playing that role of the guide on the side, the person who's there to help the students along, but not to become the one they rely upon.
Just got to go back now to my PowerPoint. So while I'm doing that, was there anything that stood out for you? If someone wants to open their audio for just a sec, they can. Something that maybe spoke to you about in your own context, either something new or something that you've kind of been thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I think.
The socialisation is really important. I mean, that connection is there, you know, and it's really important that you maintain that throughout the video online environment.
Yes, exactly. Anyone else?
We've noticed improvement in our student participation if we've engaged a lot more online as well prior to residential class.
Sorry, so what was that? So with the residential, by engaging the students beforehand?
Yeah, so we would send out, I know Joy's been very active in doing like they call coffee breaks on a Monday and engaging the students then. It makes them think prior to residential classes, and also just start sending information out and maybe a Zoom to invite them to have a chat about what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely, Sue. You know, all of these things build up your sense of presence. That the students know who you are and they feel connected to you. They feel that you're present, that you're listening, that you're contributing to them, that you're interested in them. And when students are engaged, isn't your role as a teacher easier too? Maybe a rhetorical question there.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I want to just situate teacher presence within a framework, because the literature talks about this a lot, and more that we're going into the online environment, because in the online environment, teacher presence doesn't just happen in the way that it does when we're in a room with people. And the framework that I want to talk about just briefly is something called the community of inquiry. It was developed by a professor called Dr. Randy Garrison over a decade ago, but it's still used quite a lot, and it focuses on there being three main areas that three main elements that make meaningful educational experiences. The first one is up there in the top left-hand corner is the social presence. That's the ability of participants themselves to present as real people, to communicate purposefully, to be able to develop relationships in the online environment, not just with you, but with their peers. Cognitive presence, which is on the right-hand side there, is the ability of learners to construct meaning, to build understanding, to apply what they've understood to the tasks that are presented. This element is quite strongly connected to the social presence, but mostly it depends on the teaching presence, which is the one there at the bottom, which is where you sit, where we sit. And the role of, or how teaching presence is constructed is through the design, facilitation and organisation of the learning environment and those social processes. Those things will build teacher presence, will realise meaningful and effective and aligned learning experience for students. So teaching presence is the most important of those three. You've got to pay attention to all of them, but when you come from developing teacher presence, you will include the social and those cognitive elements. And I've included some references if you want to dig deeper in there. That's just a very big, very quick overview. But just to give you an idea of where it sits in the literature. So I'm just pausing to let you read, because I read aloud before, and I know it's very frustrating when someone does that. So what this is saying is, as in the previous slide, which was looking at teacher presence in that framework of social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence. Teaching presence is something that you have to craft. It doesn't just happen. It requires that you plan your course, that you act as this instructional designer and you plan and prepare all the materials in your course. It goes right through the course as you facilitate discussion. And of course, there's still the direct instruction component that you would have in the classroom, but it's more of the guide on the side, as they talked about in that, as you know, in face-to-face environments, teaching presence relies on your physical presence and your teaching immediacy. And I think, you know, we all know what it means to have a genuine connection with our students. You know, there's a great vibe in the room. You see your students approaching their work with confidence. There's respect in the room. They're willing to try new things, to elaborate, to collaborate, to make new connections, and so on. You know, when that's working well, we all know what that feels like. When we move into the online environment, one of the reasons why I think online teaching doesn't work, or people feel it doesn't work, is because we're looking for those same sort of things to happen, and they're not there. They're not there in that same way. They don't happen organically. And it's the same as well for students. You know, many students, and you know, if you think about yourself as a learner, if you're put in an online environment and you're doing an online course, and you get an announcement from the educator of that online course and says, jump into the discussion board and tell us all about yourself. Now, you know, 1 or 2 people might do that, but most people don't. Most people sit back, and there's a whole lot of work out there that talks about the different roles that people play in discussion boards, and we'll probably talk about that in one of the sessions we've got later on when we dig deep into discussion boards and collaboration. But for most people, they're going to sit back, and if you've ever been to see the penguins, then you kind of know what I'm talking about. You know, the penguins, when they come in on dusk there, they're coming out of the sea, and there's they all line up until there's a follow, and then they all stop again waiting for the next leader. So, you know, some of you might be that kind of leader in an online environment, but most of us aren't, and we can't assume that there's going to be a student who's a penguin, that lead penguin. You know, it's our role as the teacher to facilitate those things, and that starts, as this slide says, through planning. The first way that your students get a sense of your teaching presence is through the design of your learning material. So this is unlike that sense of in the classroom, where they get it from you, from your physicality in the room. In the online environment, teacher presence is communicated very much by how you design your learning material. So whatever unit you're working in at the moment, you know, I'd get you to ask these questions of that, and perhaps get some feedback from some colleagues, and even ask your students what they think about how well the unit has been planned and organised. One of the comments that was made in the question that I had while we were waiting for everyone to join, one of the comments was about, you know, too much information and being overloaded. That's very true. So approaching your unit in a planned way and organising it in a planned way is absolutely critical. Is it a student-centred site? Again, you know, is it just a whole lot of information put up there, whether it's about readings or videos, but is it designed that students do passive learning? Otherwise, they read something and they watch something, but there isn't this sense of them needing to connect with it and feed back what they've understood, and extend that through questions and various activities that you can do to create that active learning environment. One of the ways that you can get started now on your developing a greater teaching presence in your unit, if you find that it's your unit isn't that student-centered, it isn't that active learning as you would like it to be, is to create a roadmap. That's something you can all go away and do now. And by a roadmap, I basically mean it's a learning pathway that you can put together and share with your students. Self-paced students love learning roadmaps because it gives them an idea of what they should do, when they should do it. You can link it up to when assessments are due. If you've got elements of your unit that need to be done consecutively, or if you might have units where it doesn't matter, students can jump into a topic in any order. That roadmap can show that, but it will also help you to know what content you've got in there. You know, how many of you've done an audit of all the resources that you have? What most people find when they go into the online learning environment is that they have to cut out content over time. they've realised that they've just got too much content, and they work out how to shift that content into more active learning activities. And a start for many is to modulise the learning. So, looking at chunking information down. Now, you may already be doing that, and that may be really effective, but it may also be that when you do your roadmap, you realise you've got, a lot in there, and it would be helpful to modulise that either through the design of Moodle or through the design of your content in new ways. And if you're interested in learning more about modularising learning, then on October the 3rd, we've got our learning designers, Nick and Justin, who will be presenting some of the work that they've been doing with various schools, putting VET courses online this year. So if you want to know more about how to modulise your learning, then book yourself in for that October the 3rd session. But the other thing to work towards is redesigning current activities to maximise active learning and student engagement. So you can start with that roadmap, audit what you're doing, then look at chunking that down and structuring that in a way that's going to be more engaging for students, and then look at, well, where can you move out some content and bring in more active learning. Redesigning and replanning your course actually takes time. It's not something that, even if we all had time, which I know we don't have much of, to do this takes time. So allow yourself to realise that it is something that you will that you can do iteratively, and in fact that's actually the best way. Find something you can start with, apply it, test it, evaluate it, and then come back and do the next thing. The second way that students encounter your teaching presence is through the facilitation of online discussions. And of course, this is where a lot of people get stuck. And partly because they don't do step one, they don't plan out their unit around the discussions, or, just do what we think is right, and perhaps what we've seen modelled elsewhere is, put up a question and ask students to just jump online and expect that they will jump in. So here I want to show the second part of the video, which is about how to create a learning community. And as you watch this, I'd like you to listen for new ideas that could help you to work smarter, not harder, whether you're teaching into a fully online or a blended unit. And while I swap over to the video, is there anything in the chat, Teresa?
Sorry, no, I've been keeping an eye on it, and everybody's just mesmerised.
Oh, thank you. Maybe. Okay.
The best way of learning is to actually form a community, is to share information.
Some students are shy, like for example, international students, non-English speaking background students, they're shy to speak up in face-to-face interactions.
What I found was that students who had quieter voices in the classroom flowered online.
I'm not going to talk to everyone face-to-face, but online we're kind of a bit less scared to have our opinions.
Online learning environments are really democratic. So I try and embrace that social element as much as possible.
If there are 500 million users in Facebook and there are so many billions of YouTube videos, and I saw opportunity to be able to use this same set of tools in teaching to make more engaging, if you like, for the students.
By drawing them out using these social networks, then I think that builds not just an online learning environment, but an online learning community.
I think it has actually helped them to learn from each other, plus to open up a little bit in this online environment.
They feel that they know the people that they're working with. They are no longer isolated learners in the world.
So if you share, you learn more, you get different views. So it is basically global learning.
You needed to give them enough rope to be able to engage when they wanted, but also ensure as a teacher you are responsible for their learning.
If I felt, for instance, that some students weren't participating actively, what I would do is privately or offline contact them and ask them whether there was anything that I could do to facilitate greater involvement, or I'd post general comments to a message board and make positive comments about how things were going.
in terms of the way that the students perceive that the comments that they make and the interaction that they're involved with interests other people. And I think if you see the value in that continuing conversation, then students will keep on engaging.
When someone responds to what you've just said, it makes you feel included. And that is what spurs me on.
I think there are ways of keeping students engaged with online learning. They need to perceive there to be a value in them being online and engaging with other students. And you can create that value in different ways. You can tie it to assessment. That's a very simple way of making sure that students perceive a value because they're going to get a mark at the end of it. It's quite a cynical way, potentially, but it is a useful way.
You probably have to have some participation marks involved, because otherwise students may not contribute as much as you would like them to.
One of the really important things about engineering the kind of momentum is about establishing ground rules. I think often with online dialogue, people aren't sure what the conventions are.
I set very specific criteria about what I expect. That I expect them to log on and post something for each topic at the bare minimum. Then I have levels of criteria to show what a pass level of engagement would look like, a credit distinction and high distinction. For example, to get a high distinction, you have to post multiple times, reflect on other students' contributions, offer up your own suggestions, as well as synthesise the whole topic.
What students have said was that they were able to see themselves and others differently.
You never meet these people, and yet you feel that you've developed almost a friendship with them by the end, which is great.
Normally you only meet once a week. Here you can be there every day if you want to. And I do want to.
Anyone want to, while I swap over the screens here, anyone want to make a comment on something that stood out for them in that video?
Setting the expectations.
Justin, sorry, yes.
Yeah, setting the expectations up front, that's important in a face-to-face classroom, but that really makes sense to do that for students in the online environment, so they know what's expected of them and what they can expect as well.
Absolutely, which comes back to the first thing we were talking about planning, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
As well as being a strategy and how you facilitate your online discussions, but thinking ahead of time how you're going to do that, and then executing it in this second stage of facilitating online discussion. Teresa, you had something that you were saying when we spoke earlier. Do you want to share?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I was typing a message in the chat thing. That's all right. So I'm obviously not good at multitasking. So yeah, I know that we've had discussions in the past about discussion forums. Are they worth it? Do they take up a lot of time? Is it possible? I've heard people say, well, our students won't get involved in it. I'm just wondering if maybe it is something, and it might not be for every single unit, but maybe there are times where we do consider that discussion forum, even right at the beginning in the first part of your program where you want to try to establish that community. Maybe it is worthwhile then to get to get that kind of cohort feel happening. Was that's kind of what we were talking about, wasn't it, Susie? So we'll have a look at a bit more of that, I think, as in some later sessions about ways of doing that, and recognising that it's not necessarily ideal for everything, but there are certainly, it's another tool that you can use as engagement and participation with your students.
Absolutely, and you've got not just discussion boards, but there are some great examples across the tertiary sector of people using social media. You can use blogs, wikis. Discussion forums aren't the only way, and these aren't the only way of doing active learning either. But it is a great way of getting online discussion. And I think one of the things I liked in the video where they talked about that idea of engineering momentum, just like Justin was saying, you've got to plan for it. You've got to you've got to be in there. It doesn't just happen without you. And again, like the penguin, you've got to be that first penguin that takes the lead to go. Any other comments before I move on to the next slide.
I can say when it's linked to assessment, you can see that makes a big difference. The courses I've done where it's been part of the assessment, everyone gets in and everyone does it.
Yeah, exactly, because they kind of have to. Like he said, it's cynical, but if you can link it, even if it's not possible in your particular unit to tie it to to the summative assessment, then it can be a place where students learn about the assessments, where they get to explore the things that they need to do in the assessments. So one of the common things, and Teresa and I were talking about this earlier, and it's something that she used to do, and I know many educators who do this as well, where you make the discussion forum or a or a wiki, the place where students go to ask questions and get more information about assessments. You stop receiving things via email, or if you do receive things via email, you say to the student, I'm going to post this on the discussion board, and you slowly wean them off email and have them use the discussion forums, and you can set that up initially by creating threads, but then getting in there regularly and engaging in it yourself, and then students will start to realize that's the place to go. And if you're not available, what happens once there is a momentum in this, and like the woman said, if you can get these kinds of things started in the first couple of weeks of your cohort, then they will carry it on, because they'll know that that's where I go, because if the teacher's not there, then another student might be able to answer my question. Where do I find X? Students will jump in and they'll help each other, just like they would in the classroom.
Sorry, Susie, I just had a question. I was actually just typing something about that in the chat box as you said it, so I've deleted that. But I did have a question about guidelines in regard to social media with underage students. So I'm just replying to that. I'll follow that up with the vets, with Wes's team. But if you're participating in a discussion forum on the LMS, that shouldn't necessarily be an issue, because they're already in the LMS and it's a moderated environment. It's not like you diverting them over to Facebook or one of those other sites. So the guidelines would be any other student. When you've got vet in schools, there'd be Ed Queensland box and things on those kinds of social media sites. So yeah, I think safety wise, if you're trying to hold a discussion forum, try and put it onto the LMS anyway, if possible, which on your Moodle site.
Absolutely, and I would wherever possible, to keep it into the Moodle, not only for those issues of underage, but you may find people who don't want to, or for safety reasons are not involved in Facebook or other platforms. But there can be environments where Facebook is the right tool. So in communications courses, for example, where they're doing marketing, or they're working with correct, a more applicable place. But certainly, yes, not for vet in schools. One of the points that didn't actually come out in along with that video is this encouragement to bring your own personality to the online environment. But as I mentioned previously, in the classroom, you rely on your physical presence and your teacher immediacy. Your voice, your tone, intonation, contact. All of these things helped us to build that, build rapport and maintain the human connection. And using awareness that we have even of where things are placed in the room. All of these help us to know, when things are working. And perhaps when we need to tactic. These kinds of easily to the online environment. And so we have to all of us, learn new ways to check in with our students on where they're up to. And of course, if you make videos and into that environment. But when you go into text-based environments, and then there's a lot who uses jokes a lot, then you'll find that's going to be jokes or irony. Those kind of subtleties of some of our, of our language don't work. If you're someone who speaks a lot with part paragraphs, doesn't finish complete sentences, which is a bit of Australian thing, we don't finish our sentences, then writing the way we speak writing the way we speak isn't going to work. You just can't write the way we speak, is what I'm trying to say there. So here's just some ideas. If you're someone who loves to use names a lot, and I have to say I do, I like to use names in the classroom. I like to remember my students' names really quickly, to use their names. You can bold students' names in a forum response, and I'll show you a couple of examples of what that looks like in a moment. Writing is an essential skill. If you feel that it's not an area that's your strength, it may be something you want to put on your PD plan over the next 12 months. And there are some resources all over the web on how to write for online. But the main thing you want to do is be clear and concise in your writing, use good grammar, use punctuation marks, use commas. All of those things help to set the pace and the tone of your message. If you're not sure whether you're writing in the right way, first of all, imagine how your audience would respond. But secondly, get some feedback. Ask a colleague to read your work, exactly as you would if you were putting together a conference paper or something. Get some feedback and then adjust your style. And you might even, have some students that you check in with regularly. How did you find that? What could I do better? And in the video, they also talked about this concept of sharing with students what you expect. So I think one of the women in there, she said, I tell them how often I expect that to tell them and to show them what respectful communication looks like. If that is, because that is often a concern for people, for teachers, is that they say, oh, my students, if I just give them carte blanche, they'll run away and run away with it, and what I end up seeing is not respectful communication. So you need to set those parameters up front. Share the protocols for how students should engage in this particular forum. Whether it's a discussion board, sometimes you even have to do that in the classroom, so it's no different. Excuse me. So here's just some examples of when you are in facilitating online discussions, just some things that you can do. So you posted some exercises for students, and you've got some students responding, or maybe they're not responding. Here's just some ideas that that you might use. And I've bold, so when Joe and Mary are reading that, oops, oh, there's my name. What does that say? And when students are, again, particularly when you start out, it's really important that you're in there, you're jumping in there, and you're saying, thanks for those comments. Don't feel self-conscious about thinking aloud. If there's that sense that no one's answering. Any thoughts? I think we're a little off track here. Is that last one there of assessing? Does anyone do that? Does anyone get in there right now and be quite active in their facilitation? Do I take that as a no, or does someone hasn't got off mute yet?
I think that's a not at this point.
Not at this stage.
Susan just said, Sue Kins said, not as much as I would like, and Elisa said, answers question. It goes on there to answer questions. So
goes on there to answer questions. So at least, you know, maybe if you're wanting to do more than just do that, than just answer questions, is, you know, exactly as you would in the classroom. So think about in the classroom, if you ask a question of people and they don't answer, what do? I mean, one of the things we do is we say, you know, Joe, what's your viewpoint? And there may be an environment where that's okay to do, and it's similar to what that academic talked about in the video, where she did that privately, and she went and, you know, said to some students, well, hey, you know, how come you know, can I help you get more involved? But what are some of the other things that you do when you're in the classroom, other than saying to the quiet person, you know, what have you got to say? When you ask a question, it goes flat. What are some of the things that you do in the classroom?
Dean's just made a suggestion here about what he does. At the beginning of the course, participates in the forum until the students develop a better collaboration, and then uses less direct involvement. And Elise has said to rephrase it in answer to your question then, Susie.
For me to rephrase what I said? Or
No.
Oh, that she, yes. Oh, so she answers questions and rephrases them. Yeah. And rephrases them, and then as you know, as this example says, is, you know, kind of maybe get them to dig deeper. You know, it's like, any thoughts on this issue? Anyone care to comment? So to get other people to say on that, or you might go back and say, you know, you rephrase it, Elise, and then you give them a question to go deeper than that. So you might say, would you like to say more about that, or could you give an example of you know, of what that might look like in practice? You know, whatever your context is. So are these helpful? These sorts of ideas? Could you see yourselves using them?
There's nods. There's a lot of people in the room, so you won't see everybody.
No, won't see everyone. That's right.
See some nodding, and yeah, everybody seems to think, yep, there's some yeses. We need like a snap poll, don't we? Where you can
yes,
that worm thing where you can see what everyone's voting. Yeah.
So the third area, or the final area that I want to talk about today, where students perceive teacher presence, is through your direct instruction. So this is, you know, where they see your disciplinary expertise in enacted environment, and again, whether you're in an online environment or a face-to-face, it's much the same thing. You're that guide on the side rather than the teacher at the front of the classroom. Now, I know from VET, you know, it's my background, it's very practical. My background was, and you know, that role as facilitator was a very key part in work. So, you know, for some of you, the concept of being guide on the side may in fact be, you know, you kind of going, well, student-centered, that's what I've always done. You know, I was never someone who just stood at the front of the room and, you know, about engaging students in a way that give them choice and opportunity to assume that responsibility for their own learning, to create you know, new knowledge and so on. So if that is the case, then, you know you've got a real strength coming into this online environment, but come back to planning how your course comes together, planning how you're going to foster those engaging activities, including, you know, discussions, getting discussion and discourse going on in your course. If you do think it would be great to have, you know, more active learning opportunities, give students more choice and opportunities to direct their own learning, how to do that, you know, whether they come from today or some things that you've been even, you know, buzzing around in your brain. Out one or two sure, then you can reach out to myself or another educational developer, to the educational development team, and more than happy to brainstorm ideas with you, help you to put together a plan, and you know, assist you to evaluate that, and you know, build your confidence, as well as getting you to start iteratively on things. I would like to spend just to think about how in this online environment, which, you know, as I've mentioned a couple of times today, we can't rely on our physical presence and our teacher immediacy. We've got to do things differently to get that teacher presence occurring. I'd like you to just take a moment to think about how you use humour, body language, gestures, tone, intonation, visual cues to establish your teacher presence in the classroom, and how going into the online environment, your teaching behaviours and communication styles has to adapt for that more written environment, for that more asynchronous environment, for, you know, working with the technologies where, you know, like I can't see you today because I've got, you know, screens with different things on, and so, you know, how can you adapt, or should you adapt? Could you adapt? Any questions on that?
I'm quite a involved person in the classroom, and sometimes I find that when I'm online, a lot of hand gestures as if you were with me in the classroom. But I'm just actually revamping a PowerPoint now. Involvement, I've found that it's actually quite stimulating to the mind as well. Like, you're very stimulating to look at, and just having your voice and having that ability to watch you as well, I think helps.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Sue. And Vanessa said here, use humorous clips to set the scene. Absolutely. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, about 3 to 4 people. It's just going to be random. I don't know who you're going to end up with.
No, just interesting things that Teresa was sharing with us about having to be able to like maybe create a fashionable story to get our students to come back and give it to them one little piece at a time, like a really
cool.
Really good thread. And I'm thinking, that's pretty cool. I've done some YouTube stuff, and I'm going, maybe I can suck her a bit like this.
And she's given away all my secrets, Susie.
Oh, that's a great idea. Well, as I say, we will talk some more about discussion boards, you know, in one of our sessions in the future. But just to wrap up for this, we've got, you know, only a couple of minutes, and I know you will have other places to be. But here's just the key sessions from key points from the session I want you to take away. You know, we have shifted with this emphasis of how teachers teach, but how students learn, and your role has never been more essential to ensuring students' outcomes in this newish learner-centred context. Moving online requires a rethink of your teaching behaviours. Some of those things that you rely on in the classroom, teacher presence, they won't just happen online. It's through the design of our online unit, the facilitation of discussion, and your direct instruction, where your guide on the side, that you establish your teaching presence. When there's a strong teaching presence, we all know this from the face-to-face classroom, it's no different in the online classroom. There's that real sense of community. There's a strong learning experience for students. They're more likely to engage with the learning. They're more likely to, you know, act with integrity and respect, and all of those things that we want as well. Start with one idea from this session and plan for continuous improvement over time. Through this, through today, as well as through the series, as I said at the beginning, I've peppering a whole range of different ideas. Hopefully there's been something today that really spoke to you, either from the presentation, or even in the presentation, even in the breakout rooms. Please come and join us again on Wednesday the 11th of September. Note there's a date change here. It was originally the 18th. It's been changed back to the 11th of September to some commitments that Teresa has. And we'll be talking more about this student-centred environment, but this time from the perspective of understanding how students learn and the implications of that for you as the teacher as well as for the learner. On the 3rd of October, Justin and Nick will be giving you a showcase on Moodle units and some of the things that they've been doing with units across the CQU vet, and some ideas, some really concrete ideas that you can go away with and apply straight away or look forward to for the future. And then we've got another 3 sessions built for the year. Planned for the year, should I say. If you want some more information, if you want to discuss anything, then feel free to call me or to email. You can claim this session as currency points, as the same as last time. The information in this for this presentation will be posted on Totara in the coming days, and the video will follow not long after that. Thank you very much for attending. If anyone has any final questions, then please feel free to speak now. But if you have to go, I know it's right on 1 o'clock, then please do. I'm going to stop the recording, but if anyone wants to stay on and ask some questions, feel free. Thank you very much.